Let's begin by getting an overview of the interface in Maya. This is what you'll see when you first start up Maya. You can see there's a window here that's a What's New highlight settings. This is just letting us know that inside of Maya, anything that's highlighted in green is going to be a new feature in that particular version. So for us, anything that's new in 2018 is going to be highlighted in green. We can choose to turn off that highlight or leave it on. We can also choose whether or not we want to show this window every time we start up Maya. I'll just go ahead and say OK. You can see those green highlights here, and also in the menu. So as we're going through this process, anything you see that's highlighted in green is a new feature. Let's start looking at the interface by taking a look at the menu at the very top. If you've used any sort of software package, the menu will be pretty familiar to you. The first part of the menu is going to stay the same regardless of what happens inside of Maya. We've got things like File, Edit, Create, Select, and so forth. The menu items past that are going to change based on the menu set that we have selected. In this case, we have a modeling menu set, so these menu items are related to modeling. If we change this menu set to rigging, you can see that those change to rigging-focused menu items. We can also go down to animation, we have effects and rendering, and we can also customize it. We'll go back to modeling. So inside of these menus, you'll find a lot of the common things that you'll want to do. Most of the things that you want to be able to do inside of Maya, you can find inside of a menu, but it's not always the quickest way to get to a particular tool. If we move over to the right, you'll see that there is a workspace dropdown. Right now we're set to Maya Classic, but we can change this to something more like Modeling Standard if we want to do some modeling. It's really just reorienting and changing the interface based on the type of workflow that you want to do. So we can change this to rigging, and it'll give us a rigging-based workspace. You can also customize these workspaces and save your own. We'll go back to Maya Classic. Below the menu, next to the menu sets, this is the status line. You'll see there are a lot of icons, and you'll see these little dividers here. If it's a closed piece like this, that means that that section is already open. But if it's a little arrow, you can click on it, and it'll open some new tools. So over here on the left, we have some common file functions, opening and saving files, undo, redo, that sort of thing. We've also, over here on the right, we can go to object mode or component mode, which is going to be a big part of working in Maya. We also have snapping options, which you can see based on the magnet part of the icon. Some symmetry options. We also have a bunch of rendering options, which you can see based on the slate that's incorporated into the icon. If we move over here to the right, you can see these are elements of the interface that aren't immediately visible to us, but things that we might want to access. So for instance, we might want to access the modeling toolkit. So we can click on that and it'll show it over here on the right. Or the character controls. Attribute editor is already up, so you can see it's highlighted. And then also tool settings, where we can change some of the settings of the tools that we'll be using. As we move down lower, this next line is going to be the shelf. Now the shelf is going to contain icons for tools that you want to use and you want to be able to access quickly. So you can actually customize this. You can create your own shelves and you can add your own tools and icons to this. Here you can see we have a shelf based on curves and surfaces and lots of different ways of creating those here by just clicking on these icons. Again, these are mirroring a lot of things that are available inside of the menus. Polygon modeling, sculpting, rigging, animation, rendering, and it's really just a way of quickly accessing tools that you may want to use on a regular basis. And you can customize these shelves by either creating your own or adding tools to existing shelves. If we move down here on the right, you can see this is the channel box layer editor if we take a look at these tabs, and also the attribute editor, which is behind it. In order to see the functionality of the channel box, I'm going to create an object. We can do that in a number of ways. I'm just going to go to the poly modeling shelf here and choose a cube. You can see the cube appear here in our workspace, which we'll talk about in a second. But another thing you'll notice over here in our channel box is this polycube. pcube1 is the name of the object, and then below it you can see all of these channels. So here we have translate, which is where it's moved in 3D space. Rotate, this is how it's obviously rotated, and these are in the X, Y, and Z coordinates. And then we also have scaling values. We also have the creation node of that particular object, which we can click and go in and change things about. Now this reflects anything that you have selected. So if I deselect our cube, we don't see those channels anymore. Down below the channel box is our layer editor. We can create new layers by clicking on the little plus. We can add our objects to our layer by clicking on the layer, right-clicking and say Add Selected Object. And then we can choose buttons that will either turn the visibility on or off, or change how this particular object works with animation or how it's templated or referenced. So it's really good for organizing big scenes. We don't have a big scene right now, but we can still put our cube on a layer, turn it off and on, and you can see how that would be useful with a number of different objects in your scenes. Now behind our channel box layer editor, we can also access the attribute editor. Let's access that now. Now our cube is turned off, so let me turn that back on so we can see and select it. And you can see inside of the attribute editor, we get more information about that particular object. So you can go in and select the transforms. You can see different things about the actual mesh. You can also activate your attribute editor by clicking Control A. And you can see that toggles it on and off. Now down below the channel box layer editor are our animation controls. And this whole bottom section is really dedicated to animation. We have our playback controls here, the timeline off to the left, which shows the length of our animation. This is where we'll see any keyframes that we may have added. We have a range slider down below, which we can change which section of the timeline we're actually looking at, the speed of playback that we're looking at, and some other animation controls. Down below that, we have our command line. And this is where we are able to see what's going on, get feedback from what's happening in our Maya scenes, and input actual commands via mail script into this box. Up here on the left, we have the ability to change our layouts. So this workspace in the center, right now it's just one view, one 3D view, but by using these buttons we can toggle those views and really change the layouts of these very, very quickly. Up above that are our tools. This is our toolbox, and we can choose to select our objects differently by choosing these different selection options, and also we can translate and move and rotate and scale our different objects. We want to be in object mode, so we'll choose this object mode button. And you can see the gizmo comes up when we rotate. We're able to either grab those rings, and you can see the values change in our channel box as we do that. We can also scale, which gives us a different looking gizmo. We can scale it uniformly, or we can use one of these handles to scale it non-uniformly. And again, those values are reflected over here in our channel box. Here we're in Translate, which gives us the arrows, and we can move our object around our 3D scene. Now, since we're talking about the workspace, let's go ahead and look at that. You can see there are panel menus within each of these panels. And those panel menus have different options for how you're actually viewing the geometry, what the camera's doing, things like that that are specific to this particular view. To navigate around this view, we're going to use the Alt key. So if I hold down the Alt key and I use the left mouse button, I can orbit around our object. The Alt key with the middle mouse button will allow me to move around, and the Alt key with the right mouse button will allow me to move in and out. If I ever have an object selected and I want to recenter it in the view, I can hit the F key. Now I'm able to orbit around again using the Alt key. A lot of these panel options are also mirrored here on these icons up at the top of each panel, which we can change how we're able to view our objects. We can look at them in wireframe or shaded mode, etc. So there are a lot of options here in Maya, but once you kind of get the general layout of the interface and understand where everything is, it's going to make things a lot easier. In the next clip, let's take a look at how we can start to model. So we'll take a look at some basic geometry and explore some basic modeling tools inside of Maya.